Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely incredible, the profound, timeless wisdom found in the collected essays of James Baldwin. You know, Baldwin wasn't just a writer. He was this towering intellect of the 20th century, a novelist, an essayist, and honestly, a true prophet of the American conscience. Through his essays, he literally used his pen to dissect race, identity, and the innermost workings of the human soul. And what's wild is just how radically relevant his words remain today. They really invite us to take a deep, hard look at ourselves and at our shared history. This explainer is filled with the most striking quotations from this work, lines so powerful they will make you want to read the entire book immediately. We're going to journey through Baldwin's deeply philosophical arguments, starting first with the heavy inherited burden of race in America and what that inheritance actually costs every single one of us. The conundrum of color is the inheritance of every American, be he, she legally or actually black or white. It is a fearful inheritance for which untold multitudes long ago sold their birthright. You see, Baldwin viewed the racial divide as more than just a burden placed on black Americans. He saw it as a profound moral tragedy that literally cost white Americans their own humanity, their own truth. It's a shared inheritance, right? A conundrum we are all born into, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. Baldwin frequently reflected on that exact moment the illusion of equality shatters for a black child in America. He wrote, "In the case of the American Negro, from the moment you are born, every stick and stone, every face is white. Since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose you are too. It comes as a great shock to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance has not pledged allegiance to you." That moment of discovery, that sudden jarring realization of systemic exclusion, it's this central trauma that Baldwin continually asks us to confront head-on. But before we move on, let's take a second to reflect on how Baldwin demanded to be seen in the wake of all that exclusion. He completely outright rejected the sterile sociological definitions that society tried to place on him. He wrote, "For the Negro is not a statistic or a problem or a fantasy. He is a person, and it is simply not possible for one person to define another." He forces us to recognize the full, complex humanity of the individual, basically stripping away the labels that just make it easier for society to look away. And this leads directly into Baldwin's philosophy of historical responsibility. He really challenges us to accept the entirety of our history, the triumphant parts and the horrific ones. Now, if I, as a black man, profoundly believe that I deserve my history and deserve to be treated as I am, then I must also totally believe that white people deserve their history. He's demanding an equal reckoning here. If one group has to carry the crushing weight of their past, well, so too must the other. Which brings us to one of Baldwin's most powerful, recurring arguments, the spiritual cost of supremacy. I am saying that when a people, are able to persuade themselves that another group or breed of men are less than men, they themselves become less than men, and have made it almost impossible for themselves to confront reality and to change it. Stripping others of their humanity is ultimately this massive act of self-destruction. The oppressor cages themselves in a lie, losing their own grip on reality in the process. So, what actually happens when a society refuses to confront that reality? Baldwin writes, "What they see is an appallingly oppressive and bloody history, known all over the world. But since, in the main, they seem to lack the energy to change this condition, they would rather not be reminded of it." He's talking about the willful ignorance of a society when it looks at its own bloody past. That lack of energy to change, it becomes a deliberate, quiet choice to just forget. The object of one's hatred is never, alas, conveniently outside, but is seated in one's lap, stirring in one's bowels and dictating the beat of one's heart. Notice how Baldwin completely shifts the battleground of hatred here. He moves it away from the external political world straight into the intimate internal landscape of the human heart. Hatred isn't just a weapon you hold, it's a poison you ingest. And this internalized hatred carries a terrible, terrifying risk. Building directly on that last thought, Baldwin writes, "And if one does not know this, one risks becoming an imitation and therefore a continuation of principles one imagines oneself to despise. This is the profound danger of fighting monsters without guarding your own soul. Because if we allow hatred to dictate the beat of our hearts, we risk mimicking our very oppressors." Baldwin often looked to cultural figures to really illustrate these deep truths. Take Bessie Smith, for example. She was this legendary blues singer who died tragically after a car accident, amidst these enduring rumors that she was refused care at a white hospital. Reflecting on her life and her death, Baldwin wrote, "People who thought of Bessie Smith as a coarse black woman and who let her die were far less free than Bessie, who had escaped all their definitions by becoming herself." Even in the midst of tragedy, Baldwin highlights the ultimate freedom of self-actualization over the imprisonment of those who clung to their bigotry. From the individual tragedy of Bessie Smith, Baldwin broadens his lens to this much larger theme of Black resilience. He reflects on the undeniable, indomitable will to survive, writing, "I have slept on rooftops and in basements and subways, have been cold and hungry all my life. But, my God, in that darkness, which was the lot of my ancestors and my own state, what a mighty fire burned." That mighty fire, it's the spiritual endurance that simply refuses to be extinguished by circumstance. Continuing this exploration of the mighty fire, Baldwin paints a stark, unforgettable contrast between physical horror and unbreakable spiritual will. In that darkness of rape and degradation, that fine, flying froth and mist of blood, through all that terror and in all that helplessness, a living soul moved and refused to die. The sheer, visceral weight of those words really reminds us of the terrible crucible through which that resilience was forged. We really emptied oceans with a homemade spoon and tore down mountains with our hands. This short, beautifully poetic line represents the impossible, miraculous survival and world-building of Black Americans. Despite having absolutely everything stripped from them, despite facing impossible odds with nothing but a homemade spoon, they carved out an existence and literally shaped the very landscape of the nation. This realization leads to one of his most massive philosophical statements. If we are what our circumstances make us, we are also what we make of our circumstances. And then he concludes, this is perhaps the key to history, since we are history. You see, Baldwin doesn't view history as merely the past. He sees it as a living, breathing force that we embody right now, a continuum in which we still have the agency to shape exactly what comes next. As we reach the conclusion of these essays, Baldwin offers this ultimate, sobering revelation. Listen closely to this. "I suspect, though I certainly cannot prove it, that every life moves full circle toward revelation. You begin to see and even rejoice to see what you always saw." This beautifully encapsulates the entire journey of Baldwin's essays, moving from that initial blinding shock of inequality and pain all the way to a deep, resonant, and almost joyful understanding of the human condition and our place within it. James Baldwin's words force us to look into the mirror. They demand honesty, resilience, and a love fierce enough to actually change the world. So I have to ask, which quote hit you the hardest? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into literary insights like this one.